Hello, and welcome to Cry Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to do a review of the expansion version of the Kickstarter from Force of Virtue by Masterstroke Games. So let's get started. A couple of years ago, one of the authors of this game, Jack Gassman, approached me and asked if I would be willing to do a review of his game here on Cry Havoc Wargaming. He apparently had watched a few of my videos and thought that I might enjoy the game, and he couldn't have been more correct. I've become a very large fan of this game. I've introduced it to my club. My club has taken it on very seriously. In fact, there was a time when we were playing this game more than absolutely any other game we play. We're sort of in a lull in that now, partly because we were waiting for this new expansion to come out. The expansion included rules for horses, rules for sieges, and some campaign rules. Also organized things in a better, more organized fashion. It's also being distributed both through European sources and American sources. That's complete coincidence, but the way things have unfolded politically since then, that's been a bit of an advantage. So what I thought I would do is do a review of the new items. I will eventually, in the near future, do some game videos, particularly I may be able to do the siege rolls. I have to build my castle. But I will definitely do some playing around with the cavalry rolls. I did a video some time ago, but that was with the beta product and with a very limited number of cards that I had available at the time. So we will return to that. But right now, let's go to the gaming table. So here is the rule book itself, which is primarily what I'm going to talk about. This is the new American release of Force of Virtue. The reason I'm saying that is I'm pretty sure that the European release is an A4 book, and this is an 8.5 by 11. It's following the American standards as opposed to the European standards. I do know there is some difference between who is producing which, partly because my friend at Phalanx Consortium, or Phalanx Sundry, I think they are now, is producing a lot of the American things, and also one of the authors, Jack Gassman, asked me what I thought of the American release, so he hadn't even seen it. So I do believe that they're still following that idea, that I don't think Phalanx is producing all of the books. I think they're only doing the American ones. This has been produced by Phalanx. I just received this from the Kickstarter. I think I'm one of the earliest people to get them. It is based on the same book. In fact, cover-wise, it looks a whole lot like the original. I didn't bring my original copy with me, but it looks an awful lot like the original one. There's not much to differentiate it from the outside. So what I've done, I said I thought that the regular Kickstarter version was supposed to be an A4. It might have been an A5. I can't remember. This is the absolute original copy of the book. So you'll see the difference between the American version and the British version. The original version, at least, it has a glossy cover. The American one does not. Maybe it's semi-glossy. This is an envelope for keeping cards for the campaign game, which I think is a clever little addition. The book looks just like the old book, and it has all the same art and attractiveness on the interior of it that the previous books did. An advantage of the 8.5 by 11 version of the game is that some of the small text, particularly on the charts, some of you who have played the game have gone through the trouble of trying to read the critical charts, and those are really hard to make out. They're not that easy for old eyes, even on the 8.5 by 11, but it's sure an improvement over where they were. So that's a useful thing. Rules themselves, they're basically a cleaned up version of the first edition. I'm not sure we're calling this a second edition. I don't know what we're calling this. And they haven't changed the name of it at all. But it is cleaned up from the original version. There's been other versions even more clean than mine. I have one of the older sets of the rule books from when the game was first released. And when I say cleaned up, I mostly am referring to there were some things missing. There were some important rules that were missing that I had only known about because I'd watched the videos. As best I can tell, there was a playtesting sort of mini gathering or convention when they were putting the rules together, and they'd made videos of how to play in a lot of those. And I learned how to play in a heavy way from those rather than just from the rules. We're going to come back to that because it's one of the things I really like about the new book. So there is a table of contents, always good. Then it goes into the background section. This is mostly the same as what they had before. It's going to be so similar that if there is changes and alterations, I haven't really seen a lot of them yet or discovered them. There's, the whole write-up of Rome that was in the original game. The game, in its first incantation, was very Rome-centric. They've kind of expanded beyond that, but the Rome information is still all very much here. Now, learning the rules. Here they have a breakdown on how to assemble and how to put together your scenarios. I don't think they did it in that order in the original book. I don't quite recall. Then they do something that I think is brilliant. In the old days, there were some tutorial, they're probably still there were some tutorial missions you could download from the Masterstroke game to help you get started. Well, they've actually built them into the rules now. So they're teaching the rules through those tutorial games. There is, this is what I've said I would come back to earlier, there is a QRS link to get you to those pages. This one is a little cut off. I don't know if it'll work or not. I should have tried that before I posted this, because the bottom of it seems to have been cut by the page. I don't know if that's enough missing to matter. Here's a full one over here. But they're on the Masterstroke page anyway, and I suspect that the one that is here will get you there. Those will link you to videos of the section. So it has here the tutorial mission. Tutorial mission 1, a small misunderstanding. That's a one-on-one duel. So like a lot of games are doing now, they have a system in place to help you learn the rules in segments. So each of these learning games, these tutorials, will introduce new things that need new rules, and you'll be able to learn them in small amounts. I think that was a brilliant idea. These rules aren't that hard, but so many of the things they do are so different and really innovative from other games that this is a good way to introduce you to some of those things. So there's tutorial 1, there's the guiding principles of how it works, and then the rules on how to read the cards, how to actually play it out, and how to get you through that game. Then we go to the second, 2A. The original campaign has a 2A to 2B, so the result of the first scenario will determine which you go to. They're similar, and they're covering the same role segment. So again, it has links to the videos you can watch, and it has introductions to the new rules for that new section to help bring you up, and then same thing with tutorial 3. Large number of diagrams showing descriptions and helping to better explain things they're talking about. I think those are new. Then how to prepare your own forces. The training scenarios come with pre-put together scenarios. I will warn, unless they were completely rewritten, I felt that it was a real struggle for one of those sides to handle virtue. And you have a far smaller amount of virtue on that side than you're actually probably going to end up with in real games later. They're still narrative, they're still fun, and they're going to be useful for learning, so don't avoid them. I still enjoy doing them, but it wasn't particularly fair, I don't think. So how to prepare the table, how much terrain and things. This is a game that likes terrain. There's some sample tables here. That's a new picture, I think. I don't remember them having a broken aqueduct previously. More on the further cards that weren't included in the basis idea around the cards. For those of you who haven't played the game, the cards serve a number of purposes. Some of them are your stat cards that keep track of your units. Some of them are your various leaders' stat cards. Some of them are the equipment options that you can change for those guys. And then there's a series of cards that help you do special things. There's intrigue cards and scenario cards that help bring it into the period that you're doing, that change and alter things. The cards are a major part of the game. They're also how they do the balancing, which makes the campaign system in this really easy to deal with, because you just gain more cards as you do the game that you can choose and use for your games. A description of terminology and basics. I don't think I've seen one where it's so far into the rules, but it's there. Basic game structure. Some of that's a repeat of what we saw. One of the negative things I'm seeing is I think because they didn't change a whole lot from the original book, but they've added new things, so there is a little redundancy. That's probably better than not having it. How to do virtue rolls, an amazingly important part of the game, because that's what it's all built around. It's built around the a Renaissance view of virtues, similar to the more ancient views of the four elements. Those are a large portion of the game, and it really is part of what gives this game its Renaissance feel when you're playing. How to actually play around, actions and faith. One of the more confusing parts of the game is a unit has so much faith it can use. That's basically how much virtue they can apply to a round, and then the actions are how many actions they can actually take. So a lot more explanation of these things. This chart is far more easier to read than the other ones were. It's done by crit table specific, so it's on a whole list of all of the crit tables, so it's bigger and therefore easier to read, but a lot harder, I would argue, to use than the other one, where they're all like easily available for you. How to do shoots, fight actions, again, lots and lots of examples to help you understand. I think that's a really nice addition. How to use terrain, then there's a section on advanced rules, daggers. That's something new, I think. Various optional rules. Some of these are things that were there before. Some of these are things that have come up in the last couple of years of people playing the game. How to create your warbands, how to use the nation decks, representing your forces. Here's a lot of pictures of units in the field, giving you an idea what the table should look like. Here's a list of the original character decks. How to create your own scenarios. It's a very good random rolling section system in this game for creating scenarios, which with a little narrative thinking can actually be made into a pretty good storytelling narrative event. This is really a narrative game and is best looked at in such fashion. So all of this is still on how to build narratives, how to put together these narratives to play their original simple campaign. That's all still very, very doable and usable. Not a lot has changed from the old way. This, like a life of virtue, a series of virtues. This is just like scale of campaign. Because a campaign could be like say Frostgrave, where you're playing the same characters all the time over every time you play, and the campaign could be long. A series of virtue might be multiple sessions leading to a certain end. And then they do a small one, which is this Tale of Virtue, 3-hour campaign, they're calling it. That's basically 3 attached scenarios. It's basically what's the introduction one inside the story is. All right, now we're into some really interesting new stuff. This is all stuff that's come out of the Gradera campaign Kickstarter, which is what generated this new book, and has added new sections of the book. They've combined the rules for the siege rules are in here and the cavalry rules. So the first thing is you end up with a new background section. Well, they're calling it Cavalry Siege and Map Campaigns. But it starts by talking about background. So there's an explanation of the marches, because this is the area where Gradera was set. There's a description of how cavalry is going to be used. This is mostly an introduction, but it's going to go into, again, historical background, similar to what we mentioned about Rome earlier. So there's a description of what the marches are. There's a full map of the various parts of Rome, description of the wars as they were happening in marches, some of the families that were very active there, and their backgrounds, lots of art, how to build a kingdom for the game, and then there's the actual Siege of Gradera things. So this is a description of what actually happens at the Siege of Gradera. We're going to see this map again later. So the cavalry rules. I'm going to do a video. I did a video a long time ago on the cavalry rules, but at the time all I had was a PDF of the beta rules as they existed at the time. So I'm going to redo those. I like the cavalry rules. The only thing I don't like about them is they're a little more fiddly, so that they almost feel like they're a different game. But they still use the virtue. They follow the same basic ideas of that. And the men who wrote this are horsemen. I like to think of myself as a horseman as well. And I don't think I've played any game that feels as much, that has horses acting like real horses as this game does. So I think that's part of why the rules got a little more fiddly than they are with the men, but I do like the way it feels. So it talks about the different things you're going to need to use horses, some of the new concepts that deal with the horse. The horses have temperament and training, for instance. I don't have my horse cards yet. I'll talk about that in a moment. I only have a handful that were printed from online for the introductory rules that were available for the horse rules.
but this describes how horses work. It describes the cavalry deck. Your horses are represented by a card on the cavalry deck, and then there's intrigues and training and equipment rules that affect them, just like there are for the normal armies. And then rules on how to actually do their movement actions. These here are various gauges. There's copies you can print from in here. I may have to do that. I have a 3D print measuring widget that they've made, which is what I've used, which I think is easier to use than these probably are. But to be fair, I haven't actually tried these. And I think for the purpose of the cavalry video, I'll probably do both to give you a better idea of how those work. But there's examples. There's different turnus radiances and lengths and widths depending on the gait that your horse is traveling on. You can change those gaits, or you can at least attempt to change those gaits or change your lead. How horses handle difficult training, the various riding checks that have to be made. Those are made when you're doing difficult horseman things or certain results from attacks. Voluntary riding checks. Those are the ones for changing speeds and things like that. Mishaps that can happen when you fail those. How to deal with shoot actions and with how the horses fit into the fight. Adding cavalry, of course, is an incredibly important thing to a medieval game, so it's great to do. This picture here kind of shows the widget that I was talking about. That's what I use. You can link the whole movement together and it kind of flexes around, and it's got to be more convenient than those gauges, but I will try the gauges, so I know. Then the advanced rules for riding. And then we go into the siege rules. These are for a more generic tone. Here's the Gradera model. That's what kind of inspired this. Is the town of Gradera built a game board, or had a game board built with Ashura models, and Force of Virtue ran games and is continuing to run games on that table. Incredibly elaborate reconstruction of what Gradera would have looked like during the siege. So these have rules for how to put together your defensive works, how to build the castle, how to apply the rules of Force of Virtue to go to it, which includes a sort of campaign turn with campaign decisions that are made. You map out the various areas and activate certain officer types to what work they're engaged in, and then those lead to smaller, this is a skirmish game, of course, it leads to the actual action of these smaller campaigns. So you could write a series of pre-made connected scenarios, just like we described for the earlier campaigns, but there is a map campaign in here as well. We experimented with this a little bit using just beta rules. I don't know how much may have changed yet. But these talk about what they expect for the tone of the game. They talk about, again, the guiding principles. I really like the fact that they do that. Every one of these new sections in here has had the guiding principles for that section, so you know what they think is important, what's inspiring them as game masters and our game writers. So here's the round structure. There's an event phase where things can happen randomly to one side or the other. Crisis can happen, disease may hit. Then the besieging team allocates orders to its main characters. The besieged team responds to those, and then the besieged team's characters do the same thing, and then you end the round and see the results. And the goal is to take areas, or to destroy areas, or to use up your enemy's supplies, or to gain supplies, either that affect your manpower or your ability to feed your manpower, so your various resources and things. Those actions can be resolved just by dice, or by a number, this is the event phase chart, or by actual scenarios. These are the siege scenarios. So like this wall assault is listed here right off the bat. Those actions you take on the campaign map end up being played out onto the table in these little skirmishes. Here's some of the maps. That's a map of the greater area. There's the hinterlands around Gradera and the location of Gradera itself. There's a Gradera town map. It shows the town, the castle itself, its walls. You don't have to play in Gradera. These are just really meant as samples. So for the greater game, campaign game, you're going to have various areas, zones in which you play. And so in this case, you have the town. The town is a zone. There's a wall, which is a zone. The castle will be a zone. You have a siege camp and gun pits. This whole thing is the siege cordon. Around it would be the hinterlands. If you're besieged, want to try to raise supply in the hinterlands, they have to make it through the siege cordon. So that's what I mean when I keep saying map campaign, is that's a map like that, either that map or one you create yourself. We were using the Gradera map, but you could easily create your own, having what you want in it. The back of this is all charts. The event phase for what you just described. These are the paper graphs for doing the horse turning. Again, the STL I think is just much more convenient. The rider mishap tables, and then these are the basic crit tables for the game, and then just rule summaries in general. This is convenient, easy to get to. It may be scaring you because there's like, it's a QRS at 6 pages or something. But like, this is the setup of the game. That's not something you need during the game. And an awful lot of these things, even the crits, the things you're doing a lot, you start remembering, and you don't have to always go back and look at them. This is an envelope for keeping cards for the campaign game, which I think is a clever little addition. And I brought some of the cards. They are yet a third material. I think I mentioned that earlier. Condottieri Cavalry. These can be used in multiple ways, but the fact they're being called Condottieri makes me wonder if there isn't more cavalry decks coming out in the future. Gradera Burns goes specifically with the Gradera campaign using the siege rules. This is the scenario deck for doing the Gradera campaign. The basic siege cards, these come with the defensive siege and the offensive siege cards. The cards look very similar to the old cards. They don't feel quite the same. They're fine quality, don't get me wrong. But basically, the weirdest were the very first cards I've got. That I have now 3 cards that I've bought at different times from different places, and they've all been slightly different materials. The employer cards are specialties for the different nobles who are involved in the Gradera siege, and give special abilities and perks and things to the people doing that. I'm really pleased with a number of the changes they made in the game. I think it's going to make it a little easier to learn. There are some little, I found at least one spelling error already, or spelling typo. So there may be some of that. But a lot of the confusion in the earlier rules has certainly been cleared off. There's some interesting new rules put out, and there's been some really good ideas on how to teach it with the adding of the introductory scenarios right into it. So I'm very, very pleased with the product. I'm glad to have it. I'm looking forward to getting some games using the new system on the table. So far I haven't played any games using the new book, the actual book at all. As I said earlier, I have done a little bit with the cavalry, and I've done a little bit, we did a siege campaign, or started a siege campaign with my club, but we didn't have everything we needed. We had beta cards, and we've never had a full deck of the cavalry cards. I'm not sure that the other decks were full. I really enjoy Force of Virtue. I will now. I've been only waiting to do some games again until I got this Kickstarter in. So we'll see Force of Virtue return to the page pretty soon. So I hope that gives you some understanding of what comes in the package. Obviously, it's too late to participate in the Kickstarter. It's too late even to do the late backers, but now that they are fulfilling their orders, in the very near future, the game will be available again, all these new portions. And the reality is, even some of the old stuff has been hard to get because they've been working at getting all of this fulfilled, and that's where the energy is gone. And some of the things are the same items that are going into the Kickstarter. So it's been a little difficult to get into the game in the last year or so because of this. But that's, at least locally, at least in the United States, I'm not sure if that's true in Europe, but it's certainly true here. But that's all on the verge of changing now that this Kickstarter is being fulfilled. And very well, I would argue. I had a few decks missing from my Kickstarter. I mentioned it, and Phalanx Sundry, I think they call it now, Phalanx Sundry and Games, West Phalanx Consortium, took care of it for me very, very quickly. Now, he's a friend of mine, but still, that was all set rights within days. I'm very, very pleased with that sort of response. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have questions about Force of Virtue, or if you've played any games of it and would like to comment or talk about that, please do that in the comment section down below. Also, if you have any ideas for further content you'd like to see us produce here on Cry Havoc Wargaming, we look at the content section for that, and sometimes the other social webs. I'm going to have to do a Battle Space Deluxe video soon. This is partly a reminder to me because I just told somebody I would do it. A step-by-step, in-depth how the game is played video. If you have ideas for further content, we look in the content section for those. If you'd like to support the page, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee account. There's a link to that down in the description section down below. And if you'd like to
receive further notifications for videos like this one that may help you determine how to better spend your money or time in your tabletop wargaming hobby, then I hope you'll hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. Till next time, cheers.